All right, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to be reading a little bit from this book. I don't know. Someone just told me to pick up this book that I had sitting here, and it's called Jerusalem and the Crusades. Let me see. I'm trying to see where it's. To my mother and father in all love and gratitude. Okay, I'm trying to see when the book was written. That's crazy. There's no date. Nope, no date. Wow. All right, that's the first. That's the first. I mean, I know it's old. Yeah, there's no date here. So, okay, so it says, this is chapter, I think, 14. And it says, the last crusades, faith unchanged by suffering, time, or death, and valor lion, mettled Lord, leaning upon his own good sword. Okay? And again, you can take it as you may. It says, we are to think that the lovely land of Palestine is... Hold on. Okay. So it says, we are to think of the lovely land of Palestine as a shore to which the full tide, pouring in at its height, brought crusades, both small and great, as well as stray companies or corporations, right, of men from time to time. Okay? Now, we're going to look at Palestine real quick, because it's saying Palestine from Latin Palestina, name of a Roman province, from Greek Herodotus, from Hebrew Pele Sheath, which reminds me of Pele from the Hawaiian goddess. Philistia, land of Philistines. See Philistine. In Josephus, the country of Philistine extended under Roman rule to all Judea and later to Samaria and Galilee. Okay, so again, it says revived as an official political territorial name in 1920 with British mandate under Turkish rule. Palestine was a part of 3 administrative regions. Okay, it's saying the regions. I want to read through this quick. I don't want to read the whole thing. April 25th, 1920, the Supreme Council of the Allied Powers of San Remo. During the occupation, Palestine formed accompanied enemy territory administration south and headquarters at Jerusalem. And then in WordNet, it says that Palestine, a former British mandate on the east coast of the Mediterranean, divided between Jordan and Israel in 1948. And it also says an ancient country in southwestern Asia on the east coast of the Mediterranean Sea, a place of pilgrimage for Christianity and Islam and Judaism. Okay, it goes on to tell me to go to Philistine. And it says, one of the Old Testament's people of the coastal Palatine, who made war on the Israelites in 1400s or 14th century. Let's see, people of Peleshi. Let's see, the world probably is the people's name for themselves, hence a heathen, an enemy, an unfeeling foe, from 1600. Okay. Let's see, an enemy of God's word, literally a Philistine, inhabitant of biblical land. So again, this is somebody that was brought in, an inhabitant. Okay. And again, I did a video on inhabitants versus something like that, something about inhabitants of whatever on the channel if you want to search the channel. But this was a while back, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. It says townies and hence the extension, an uncultured person, an unfeeling enemy. Okay, people who believe most that our greatness and welfare are proved by our being rich, very rich, and who most give their lives and thoughts to becoming rich are just the very people whom we call Philistines. Right? A person, and then in WordNet it says the definition is a person who is uninterested in intellectual pursuit, who is a lowbrow, anti-intellectual. The adjective for Philistine is smug and ignorant and indifferent or hostile to artistic and cultural values. Okay. A member of an Aegean people who settled ancient Philistine around 12th century BC. Again, okay, so that's what it says about the Philistine, okay? So it says here, we are to think the lovely land of Philistine as a shore, which the full tide pouring in at its height brought crusades. Very interesting. Both small and great, as well as stray companies of men from time to time. But now the tide was going out. Real crusades were very few, and the little companies of men were fewer still. In a few years more, the tide would be out altogether, and then the Holy Land would be left to herself as best she could. Because men now cared only for what they could get out of her, and they seldom brought her anything, but came with empty, greedy hands that would be filled no matter how. The people of Palestine were beginning to understand at last that no one cared any longer about crusades and all the trouble and hardships of them. Though there were here and there priests who preached them, and a few who were ready to take the cross. The kingdom of Europe were having to fight hard, each one for its own place and safety among the nations. And every sword and every penny was wanted for that. In 1216, okay, so again, when I'm seeing these 1216, it's reminding me of 2016 and stuff like that, or 2020 when it's talking about 1920. So again, I feel like a lot of this stuff has already been going on underneath our nose for a very long time, and again, the recreation of this or whatnot, okay? 1216, Andrew, king of Hungary, led a small crusade to the Holy Land, but he never reached Jerusalem, and nothing came of it except a few uncertain battles. Andrew himself left the crusades early on in order to take back a Hungary, some ancient treasures he had got hold of. Amongst these was the what he quite believed to be one of the 12 water spouts of stone. Again, I don't know why that's making me think about like a pineal gland, but again, it might be talking about something else. A water spout of stone could be, okay. It's reminding me of this like stone thing that's at this park that I went to before, where there's spring water, pouring out of it. That kind of reminds me of that too, in which the water was turned into wine at Cana of Galilee. The rest of the army wandering into Egypt suffered dreadfully from hunger and were fed by the kind-hearted sultan of that land, who was moved to tears by their pains. Okay? And for 3 weeks sent them 3,000 loaves of bread every day. 10 years later, Frederick II of Germany led a well-armed force to Palestine. At Acre, the Knights Hospitallers and the Templars joined him and received him as their king in right of his wife, who was the daughter of the prince who now bore the empty title of King of Jerusalem. Frederick made a treaty with the Saracens by which the Christians were to have the holy city itself. The Saracens only kept the mosque and the old temple, church of the Knights of Templar, for their houses of worship, but men were afraid either to follow. Frederick openly or to stand apart from him. He had quarreled with the Pope before leaving Europe, and they knew that they sided with Frederick. The Pope would not mostly excommunicate them with him, and if they went against Frederick too boldly, he was strong enough to punish them. So between the two fears of the crusade of Frederick II of Germany got no support. And when he reached the Holy City, he met with a very cold welcome. He went straight to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It was empty. Frederick crowned himself in the sight of his own king, his own knights and soldiers, for no one else was there, and there was no service of any sort, no prayers said, no vows taken. How Frederick and his following soldiers all must have despised the silly fear of the Pope of far-off Rome that kept the priests of the people of Jerusalem from going to the crowning of the man who had actually recovered Jerusalem from the Christians. Okay. Now that Frederick cared for either one of the other, he had come to Jerusalem to show the Pope that he could do so with or without his blessing. I promised I would come, he said, and I am here. But he added, I am not here to deliver the holy city, but to keep my own name. Perhaps what gave him the most pleasure was writing from Jerusalem to tell the Pope that by a miracle he had got back to the city of Christ for the Christians. It was really quite like a miracle to have recovered Jerusalem without having shed one drop of blood. The Pope was extremely angry at the thought of any miracle being worked for a man with whom he had a quarrel. But not all his angry words could undo what Frederick has done. Frederick left Jerusalem 2 days after he entered it. His crusade and his coming had brought no real comfort to the Christians of Jerusalem, though they had been given back the city. They lived in daily terror of being attacked by the Saracens, and they spent most of their time in flying to the Tower of David for safety. And sure enough, as soon as the 10 years truce made by Frederick was over, the Saracens from Currach, beyond the Jordan in the land of Moab, again, I'm thinking the southeastern portion of the Americas, okay, Florida, even, goodness, what tribe am I thinking about down there in Florida? Goodness, I can't remember no names. The Seminole, and other tribes that were in that area at one point in time. I don't know, that's what I'm just thinking. Because sometimes I think that what river was that Washington was on? Was it the Ohio? No, what river was that he went across? Kind of sound the same as the Christ story. I did a video on it a while back. I don't know, for some reason that usually reminds me of the Jordan for some reason. So again, the land of Moab marched suddenly upon Jerusalem and took it from the Christians, who were far too frightened to resist. The Saracens also leveled to the ground the Tower of David, which had been for so many years the chief fortress of the city. A small crusade followed on this bad news, led by Richard, Earl of Cornwall, a son of King John, a nephew of Lionheart. So again, I don't know, this reminds me of it sounds like a Indian name to me. When the Saracens heard his name, they thought that it was King Richard himself, who had come back from the grave to punish them, and they were filled with the wildest fears. But they need not to have troubled themselves in the least, for Richard of Cornwall was a very different man from his uncle. The Templars and the Hospitallers both refused to help him in any way. And Richard could only visit Jerusalem as a pilgrim, see the holy places, and return to England, having done nothing at all. Worse days were in store for Jerusalem. A fierce Turkish tribe called the Kharaz, wait, the Kharizmians swept down upon the city, some 20,000 of them. In their approach, all the Christians fled from their houses, for they had heard of the cruel and bloodthirsty way that the invaders. They fled in haste, taking what they could carry away from them, but thinking more of saving their lives than of their possessions. And the Kharizmians found only a few old and sick people who could not escape and whom they murdered at once. They then set out to trick the Christians into returning by hoisting Christian flags upon the walls. The Christians looked out for their hiding place all around the city and saw flags and believed that some miracles have saved the city for them. A miracle beyond a miracle. Yea, the Lord hath done great things for us already, wherefore we rejoice. They hastened back in joy, mothers carrying their babies, little children trotting joyfully behind, happy in the thought of going home, men driving back the donkeys and mules laden with the few things that they had been able to carry out with them in their hasty flight. There was not a sign, not a sound from the city to make them afraid, as they poured in through the gates, all rejoicing as they made their way to their deserted homes. But presently the great gates of the city swung to heavily. No escape was possible this time, and the nightfall and the savage Kharizmians went from house to house and simply butchered unfortunate citizens whom they had tricked too well. All to this end, every Christian was hateful to these wild people, and even broke open the coffins of Godfrey and the other kings and burnt the poor dead dust. So great was the terror of the Kharizmians brought with them wherever they went, that the Christians and the Saracens joined together to turn them out of the holy city, but they were defeated in the awful battle near Jaffa. The 30,000 Christians and Saracen soldiers fell that day. Of the Christians, only 33 Templars, 20 Hospitallers, and 5 Knights of a German order remained alive. Wow. Fortunately, the Sultan of Egypt sent a large army against them soon after, and the Kharizmians were wiped out in the 10 bloody fights. They disappeared from the land and from the history at the same time, and it is quite certain that the world has not missed them at all. Out of all this darkness and unrest arose the last 9th crusade, that of Louis the I don't know. Let me see. Damn Roman numerals. Let's see. Okay, 9. Okay. King of France and Saint, 1248. The good king had a very bad illness, of which he so nearly died that one of the 2 ladies who were nursing him thought he really was dead, but the other one declared that he was not. And while they were arguing about it, the king suddenly came out of his faint and in a weak voice commanded that the cross should be brought to him, that he might take it to show his gratitude to God for having spared his life. This was done, and when the queen, his mother, heard that he was recovered his speech, she showed as much joy as could be. But when she was told by himself that he had taken the cross, she displayed as much grief as if she had seen him dead, for she feared the long journey to the Holy Land with all its dangers and hardships, and she feared also for the safety of France during the month that the king must be away. But Louis, having taken the cross, never rested until he had got together a large army, and they all took ship at Marsalis in August 1248. There were many of the bravest of French knights and the nobles who took the cross with the king, and amongst these was one whom he loved very much and was really the greatest friend he had in the world. And this knight, the Sieur de Joinville, okay, something like that. I don't know where I put my glasses. Has written the story of the crusade of St. Louis, which is one of the nicest books that ever were written. De Joinville tells us how they embarked and how the door of the vessel was open and the horses were led inside. Then they fastened the door and closed it up tightly, because when the ship is at sea, the whole of the door is underwater. Poor horses, they must have suffered a good deal in their dark, cramped stable, with the noise of the sea beating. 1 second.